Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday in the nation's largest city, what is colloquially known as the Big Apple, I'm of course speaking of Manhattan, New York, we saw a terrible terrorist attack unleashed upon the good and decent people of these United States of America. We can add another 8 names to the list of victims of a barbaric, backwards, medieval ideology that clearly has no place in an open, honest, but above all free society like that of these United States of America. Yet in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave, we see that again, we are refusing to come forth and actually properly identify the enemy in our midst. It's been 16 years since the dastardly terror attacks of September 11th, 2001. And yet, after this barbarian, because that is clearly what this man was, came forth and shouted Allahu Akbar and took a rented truck, a pickup truck, which he rented from Home Depot, and weaponized it, we can see that their ideology is attempting to strike terror and fear in the hearts of the good and decent, true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Why? Because they loathe and despise the freedoms and liberties that have come to define us, both as a nation and people, stretching back to the inception of this nation some 237 plus years ago. Why is it that we here, the leaders of the free world, are afraid to admit who our enemies are and what it is that truly motivates them? Because what is happening right now, this fear, this trepidation, this unwillingness to call our enemies out for who and what they are, in point of fact, is insanity. It's doing the same repeated course of conduct, expecting a different resultant outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the clinical definition of insanity. And the insanity has got to stop if we are going to protect ourselves from the agent provocateurs of tyranny, despotism, but above all, oppression. They don't care about our way of life. In fact, they loathe and despise it. Yet, we know that people like Nerdface Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator and flying saucer himself, repeatedly attempt to go out and explain away the root cause as being something as ridiculous as the hoax known as man-made global warming. Why does the left continuously apply this approach? Why do they always seek to do everything in their power to obfuscate the truth, to bamboozle the good and decent citizens of these United States of America, and come forth with this drivel that has no context or connotation or even connection with reality? It's because just as their frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist ideology is that of a collectivist ideology, so too is the approach of the Islamo-fascist barbarians a form of collectivism. That's what it's all about. Islam is a political ideology. Islam is the common denominator behind a vast majority of the terrorist attacks that we have seen anywhere on the face of God's green earth over the course of the past several successive decades. It is an evil force. It is a barbaric ideology that wishes to force us all back into a medieval frame of mind. We cannot, and we most certainly will not, tolerate or allow ourselves to be perverted by such forces and agent provocateurs of tyranny, despotism, but above all oppression, particularly here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. It is our duty and obligation, as well as responsibility in our individual capacity as American citizens, to think about this and to demand that we do the steps to protect us. The twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism must be rejected outright and sooner rather than later. The longer that we allow that to continue, unfettered, unchecked, but above all unchallenged, the more difficult it is going to be to secure our interests, both as a nation and people. Time and again we see these dark forces of a barbaric nature carry out these sorts of attacks, even when they are supposedly losing their actual national capital with the fall of Raqqa. Now, there had been a lot of chatter that the Islamo-fascist state would have attacks come forth, that they would target American citizens in large places to cause as much fear, trepidation, and terror as is humanly possible. This is a dark ideology, and yet, before even the facts had, come to the surface, before an investigation could even be started, we know that the police commissioner in New York City, as well as the various outlets of the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, rushed out to push out a propagandist narrative in which they said that there was no terror link here. But through the annals of social media, and in this era when everyone essentially has a news camera in their pocket with these smartphones and smart devices that are prolific in this fast-paced modern society in which we live today, the truth, the light of truth, dare I even say, began to come forth and conflicted with the official narrative that was being spun as the Islamo-fascist Middle Easterner was taken into police custody. 8 people have been added to the list of victims of Islamo-fascist terrorism, and yet in the onslaught of this all, those in positions of authority and those with the ability to disseminate the message and the information from the official channels and streams continue to attempt to propagate a message that can only be described as politically correct nonsense and drivel. The sorts of things that are intolerable as well as insufferable. The good and decent people of the land of the free and the home of the brave need to know the truth. The truth needs to be the ultimate objective of those people who are in positions of authority, as well as have the ability to carry forth the message to the American people. The twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism are quite literally getting people killed. It's not caused by poverty. It's not caused by the hoax known as climate change or man-made global warming or whatever other nonsensical name they wish to give this made-up drivel, this new age religion of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists to create some new grand redistributive scheme. No, what it needs to be is what they are telling us. Why don't we take the terrorists' words and their manifests as what it is at face value? Why do we always sit here and attempt to try and backpedal that or say that Islam is the religion of peace? I'm sure you all recall in the immediate wake and aftermath of those dastardly terror attacks over 16 years ago when President George W. Bush went in front of the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media in order to state that fundamentally flawed and completely intellectually disingenuous statement that Islam is the religion of peace. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the common denominator that we see come to the surface time and again with respect to the vast majority of the terror attacks that we have seen unfurl before the shocked and horrified eyes of the civilized world is the centerpiece of Islam. And that is something that shows no signs of improving, particularly within the foreseeable future, because if we are unwilling and unable to properly identify these forces that have gone on the record repeatedly to the point of it being ad nauseum that they wish to destroy us whenever and wherever they find us, then we are... Enough is enough, because we, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, cannot continue to turn a blind eye to these open and obvious threats to our health, safety, and well-being. But at the same time, we cannot just capitulate to these dark and tyrannical forces by trampling upon our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, which are codified in the Bill of Rights or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution. It would be to hand them victory on a silver platter if we are to be cajoled and forced by gunpoint, in a sense, to capitulate to their dark, twisted, evil machinations and ideology. We here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have always stated that the main thing that we have to do in the immediate wake and aftermath of such dastardly attacks as these is to be ready, willing, and able to call out our foe and to state in no uncertain terms that the land of the free and the home of the brave will not tolerate or accept this. That is something I would like to see come forth. And it is a good thing that Donald Trump has come forth and mentioned that the forces of Islamic terrorism have to be stopped. The extreme vetting of people who wish to enter this nation, who try to proclaim themselves as refugees, needs to go forth. You know, the left always wants to sit there and talk about common sense gun regulations. Why are they so opposed to common sense immigration regulations? Why is it always some hypocritical position assumed by the left whenever it comes to keeping us safe, sound, and secure? Well, it's because the left loathes and despises everything that we stand for in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. That is the only logical or inexorable conclusion that I can reach, examining everything under the totality of the circumstances and in an objective fashion. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to clearly deal with this problem. We have to do it efficiently. We have to do it within the confines of the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. But the left doesn't want to do that. And there are many on the right who don't want to do that either. We have to be cognizant and aware of our surroundings. You know what else is kind of funny about all of this? Funny in a grotesque or gruesome sort of way, not ha-ha funny, but why is it that the left doesn't come forth and say that we now need to ban automobiles. This is another case where Islamo-fascist barbarians have weaponized a car, just like they weaponized box cutters and airplanes. It tells us that those souls with evil hearts and even more wicked intentions will not be stopped by laws and regulations alone. The only way that we can secure ourselves and protect ourselves for the long haul is to be ready, willing, and able to be situationally aware and to protect ourselves. That's part of the entire reason that the Bill of Rights, or first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, includes the Second Amendment. It is the right of the citizens to be able to defend themselves. But I'm sure that the left is still going to try and spin that some way, some form, some fashion that's intellectually disingenuous drivel and nonsense, because that's what they always do. That has been their modus operandi in the rank and file of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists for well over 150 plus years now, folks. And we see that they are quick to judge anyone else. Anyone that disagrees with their approach, their collectivist mindset, they are quick to generalize. But in the immediate wake and aftermath of a heinous attack, orchestrated and even proclaimed to have been orchestrated by Islamo-fascist barbarians, oh, well, we can't rush to judgment. Folks, there's a serious problem in this repetitive course of conduct that we see arise to the surface time and again, over and over again, the same message, the same narrative. Why do we never get past this? It's because deep down, they loathe and despise the good and decent people of the United States of America. And even when there was evidence of this guy going out there screaming, Allahu Akbar, meaning God is great in Arabic, people in this country, in the annals of social media, were attempting to deny it. They attempted to apply that ridiculous notion of moral relativism. Oh, well, Irish Catholics were terrorists back in the 70s. Maybe it was a Presbyterian. This nonsense has got to stop. When we keep putting blinders on and willfully turning a blind eye to the very evidence and proclamations that these barbarians themselves have been making, that, we're going to have this problem. They're going to feel empowered. And of course, the labels, the buzzwords that the Fabians are so famous for, came out within an instant. Oh, well, you're just Islamophobes. I'm not afraid of Islam. I'm not afraid of these terrorists. I'm afraid of people that empower them, that allow them to claim credence and credibility with respect to their dark, twisted, and dare I say, totalitarian as well as authoritarian ideology and philosophy. Because if we give them credence, if we start attacking our fellow countrymen and women, saying that, expressing what we see, expressing our opinions, having a heartfelt position, is bad or evil or Islamophobic or is some other form of hatred or bigotry, then you're missing the entire big picture. You are essentially falling into their narrative, allowing their narrative to come into fruition in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. We cannot allow that. We can ill afford to allow that to come to fruition, particularly at this current juncture in time. It would be as though we attempted to apply moral relativism to Hitler's Third Reich during the dark and twisted days of the Second World War. Oh, Blitzkrieg is terrible, but not all Nazis are for the Holocaust, or not all Japanese imperial soldiers that rape and kill women are bad people. Please spare me. If we had adopted the mindset that so many people hold today, in this era of a dominion of the perpetually offended, we could have never won that war. And we would have fallen to the forces of tyranny, despotism, but above all, oppression. Now, folks, keep in mind that is exactly what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists would like to see happen to us right here, right now, as I speak into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. They want to see that come to fruition in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave, because they loathe and despise our freedoms and liberties, just as the Islamo-fascist barbarians loathe and despise our freedoms and liberties. This is why we can never bow down to them. This is why we can never let up or give them an inch, because if you give them an inch, they will take the whole damn country. Ladies and gentlemen, right here, right now, at this current juncture in time, we have to be ready, willing, and able to proclaim just exactly what direction we want to go with this. And the decisions that we make now will have repercussions throughout the course of the next several successive generations. So it is something that we should think long and hard about. But how can we think long and hard about it if we're being intellectually disingenuous to ourselves, denying that there is this common thread, refrain, and denominator that rears its ugly head time and again? Oh, well, we can't say this about them. How many innocent people have to die before the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism are thrown on the rubbish bin of history where they so rightly deserve to be and belong? How many souls have to be untimely ripped from their family, friends, and loved ones before we admit that there is a lingering and festering problem with the political faith and ideology of Islam? Because the longer that we ignore this, the longer that we continue to repeat the same lines, the same nonsense, the same drivel, the worse this problem is going to become. The longer and more treacherous the journey that this nation will have to undertake in order to defend itself will become as well. You know, folks, common sense dictates that we have to be ready, willing, and able to hold ourselves accountable, to hold each other accountable, and to hold the media, elected officials, everyone accountable. Because again, as I have stated oft times in the past, on our state-of-the-art radio program here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, the two twin pillars that form the bedrock foundation of our culture, society, and shared national character, heritage, spirit, but above all identity, is self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. And when we examine the entire course of our relatively brief yet illustrious history here on God's green earth, we see that the American people are truly at their best when they are able to be the most self-determinate. That has always been the case. Yet in this modern society, where we are dominated by those who are perpetually offended, it is as though we purposefully go out of our way to expose our necks to the executioners of tyranny, despotism, but above all oppression. Those dark and twisted ideologies as well as philosophies are hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of these United States of America, both as a nation and people. And we are turning a blind eye to it. We are exposing ourselves to greater risk. And unfortunately, this is not a mindset which is confined to the good old U.S. of A. We see it in all of Western culture and civilization. The civilized world is essentially running towards a precarious cliff at breakneck speed with a complete and total lack of regard or disregard for our situational surroundings, for our posterity, for all of the time-honored values, traditions, and institutions that have defined us throughout the course of human events. We're ignoring all of it. We are just throwing it away because someone might potentially at some point in time feel offended and go run around and blow themselves up. Why doesn't that count as offensiveness? Why don't these attacks count as being offensive? It reminds me of a line out of George Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So, all offensiveness is equal, but some people's offensiveness, based on whether they belong to an insular or discrete minority, or whether they are of the right type, is more equal than other people's sense of offensiveness. Well, here's something to consider, food for thought, for lack of a better term. You don't have a right to be free from offensiveness. You don't have a right to be free from offense. This is the United States of America, not the United States of the perpetually offended. Yet the perpetually offended children are attempting to seize control of the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And they will push us over the edge of that precarious cliff. And they will place us at risk repeatedly, incessantly, time and time again. Again, the madness is going to have to stop. We are going to have to sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation as a nation and people to get at the root of this problem and how we can expect to overcome it, because this cannot be allowed to continue. This current situation is both untenable and unsustainable. Yet the usual suspects and characters are going to come forth, and they're going to do everything within their power to try and undermine the health, safety, well-being, as well as freedoms and liberties of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's so predictable. Despite how disgusting it is, their reactions are so predictable. It occurs over and over again in repetitive fashion that it has reached the point of ad nauseum. The excuses will continue to roll out, the denial will continue to go forth, and we'll bury our heads in the sand until the next time some Islamo-fascist barbarian terrorist decides to carry out and orchestrate a heinous act of violence. And again, we go back and repeat the process. Again, we go back and bury our heads in the sand and refuse to acknowledge that there is a major problem here. And not just a major problem, a horrific, just horrific, repetitive thing. And again, I have to ask myself, why is it that we do this? Why is it that we refuse to acknowledge the things that have unfurled before our own very eyes? It makes no sense to me at all. But again, they'll just want to come forth and deny each and every aspect of it. Each and every aspect of it. Because to their mind, that's the way it is. That's the way it always is. We can't have this. But the amazing thing is, 8 are dead, 11 wounded. And we know that ISIS had threatened to orchestrate attacks in New York City for Halloween, because yesterday was Halloween. It was the last day of October for the year 2017, and that's a very popular day, a very crowded tourist attraction type day for the Big Apple. And ISIS knew it. ISIS was aware of it. ISIS wanted to go forth with terror attacks. This comes from PJ Media. ISIS calls for attacks on Halloween celebration. Get out before it's too late. This was published on October 30th, the day before the attack, by Bridget Johnson at PJ Media. And she starts her piece with, a pro-ISIS media group circulated an image today of a knife dripping blood over the Eiffel Tower, calling on lone jihadists to attack on Halloween. That was a code. That was a signal for their sleeper cells to essentially spring into action and spread pandemonium and terror throughout the civilized world. It goes on. It says, enjoy their gathering, reads the text superimposed over the image. Terrorize October 31st. So already, these Islamo-fascist barbarians made no bones about what their true, dark, and, dare I say, wicked as well as evil intent was all about. They wanted to spread terror on Halloween. And they profess to be Islamo-fascist barbarians. They are proud of it. Because they see this as some grand opportunity in order to spread their vile, medieval line of thought and philosophy in the heart of the civilized world. They have openly declared and repetitively declared war on the citizens of the civilized world. They want to take on modern civilization itself and plunge us back into the Dark Ages and They can succeed if we continue to deny that there is a major, significant, and repetitive problem here in which the common denominator each and every time always happens to be Islam. It then added a hashtag of Passe le show, which is no choice. Below that was the message, get out before it's too late. You see, that's all part of their dark, twisted, and dare I say, maniacal plan. It's to not specifically state where they're going to attack. It's a message to their splinter and sleeper cells that have embedded themselves throughout the Western world to come forth and spread as much terror and pandemonium as is humanly possible. Folks, they make no bones about it. They've said it. And yet, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are going to continue to want to bury their heads in the sand, to stick their fingers in their ears and go, la, 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 there's no problem here. Well, enough is enough. Unless and until we are ready, willing, and able to admit that this problem is here, this problem is merely going to fester and be exacerbated with each passing successive day. Apparently, this thing, according to PJ Media, was produced by Centre Mediaracte Arnu, which has produced in French not only videos about jihadist operations, but about how online jihadis can practice web security. This group also distributes ISIS Rimuha magazine, which has not yet been published this much in French. The image was shared by a Twitter account that distributes caliphate news. Images and videos in French. Now maybe that was a bit of deflection on their part, to try and have it circulate in France, to make it be another Nice attack, or Paris attack, or the Berlin bus attack. And we see that they utilize vehicles time and again. They have found that this is one of the ways that they can orchestrate these attacks that it is exceedingly difficult for us to defend against. We can't restrict the free movement of people, but that's what they want to do. They want to sow the seeds of dissension and divisiveness. They want us to surrender our way of life, to bow down and capitulate. And if we think back to what the root meaning of the word Islam is, it means to submit to the will of Allah, or their God. And they don't care how they do it. Terror, intimidation. After all, Muhammad is known as the prophet of the sword. That's what they do. That's part of the whole thing. And yet, it just doesn't seem to register with so many people. It seems to continue to be something that we struggle to grapple with, something that we struggle to come to terms with. Benjamin Muller and William K. Roshbaum, as well as Al Baker at the New York Times, put out a piece in which they state that the Manhattan terror attack kills 8 and injures 11. They started off. A driver plowed a pickup truck down a crowded bike path along the Hudson River in Manhattan on Tuesday, killing 8 and injuring 11. before being shot by a police officer in what officials are calling the deadliest terror attack on New York City since September 11th of 2001. The rampage ended when the motorist, whom the police identified as, and here it is, Sayfullah Saipov, 29 years of age, smashed into a school bus, jumped out of his truck, and ran up and down the highway, waving a pellet gun and a paintball gun, shouting, "Allahu Akbar." Before he was shot in the abdomen by the officer, he remained in critical condition on Tuesday evening. Now we see that Mayor Bill de Blasio declared the rampage a terrorist attack, and federal law enforcement authorities were leading the investigation. Investigators discovered handwritten notes in Arabic near the truck that indicated allegiance to the Islamic State, the Islamic fascist state, two law enforcement officials said. But investigations had not uncovered evidence of any direct or enabling ties between Mr. Saipov and ISIS, and were treating the episode as a case of an inspired attacker to counter terrorism, officials stated. Irrespective of whether it was inspired by the rants and ramblings of ISIS or not, they are claiming credibility as well as responsibility for this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our enemy telling us point blank and to our face who they are and what their dark and twisted machinations and plans and devices are. It's good that de Blasio finally comes forth and admits that this is terrorism. I mean, the great weight of the evidence examined under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity makes it clear beyond a shadow of the doubt that this was a terror attack, that it goes down the same repetitive lines of Islamo-fascist barbarism that we see all too often in this modern era and society in which we live today. And the sooner that we admit this, the sooner that we can begin to truly formulate a plan to rectify this lingering issue once and for all. The New York Times article goes on. It says that de Blasio said at a news conference, based on information we have at this moment, this was an act of terror and a particularly cowardly act of terror aimed at innocent civilians. Well, terror is always aimed at innocents and soft targets. That's how you spread fear. That's how you disseminate the dark and twisted ideology of evil. And that is what these Islamo-fascist barbarians were wanting to do. It's what they had been planning on. It's what they are counting on. It's a tried and true tactic and strategy for them. And when you make boneheaded statements like that, it only lends credence and credibility to the nonsense and to the evil, vile wickedness that was put on full display in the heart of America's largest city. Five of the people killed were Argentine tourists who traveled to New York for a 30-year high school reunion celebration. And the Argentine authorities said they were Hernan Mendoza, Diego Angelini, Alejandro Pagnucco, Ariel Irijal, and Hernan Ferrucci. Martin Ludovico Mauro, a sixth member of the group, was merely wounded. You see, the threat, which is a substantial as well as significant threat that is posed by these Islamo-fascist barbarians, is not merely constrained to American citizens. It's, as I said earlier in the program, that this is going to impact all of the Western civilized world. And unless we begin to truly start to grapple with this, I don't foresee this getting any better. Certainly not within the foreseeable future. We are going to have to seriously start reconsidering the way that we've been approaching this. And we're going to have to get past the qualms that we set up for ourselves by continuing to adhere to the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism, by refusing to stand up for ourselves. And here's part of the other thing. When we look at who this guy is, Mr. Saipov came to the United States from Uzbekistan in 2010 and had a green card that allowed permanent legal residence. He had apparently lived in Paterson, New Jersey, and Tampa, Florida. Mr. Saipov rented a truck from Home Depot in Passaic, New Jersey, where a white Toyota minivan believed to be his was found parked. The truck came crashing to a stop near the corner of Chambers and West Streets by Stuyvesant High School. When evil is prepared to do whatever it can to cause as much harm, death, and destruction as it possibly can, it is our duty, obligation, but above all responsibility to stand up to it in any way, shape, or form in which we possibly can. And of course, that is going to require that one of the first things that we do is properly identify who these dark, twisted, and dare I say maniacal forces who want us dead truly are. Enough with the kid gloves. It's time to take the kid gloves off and to truly begin to address the core root cause of the problem. We can ill afford to continue to bury our head in the sand like a bunch of ostriches. Now, more than ever, when these people have orchestrated these attacks time and again and have stated in no uncertain terms what it is that motivates them and compels them to create such vile and wicked actions, it falls onto our shoulders to rectify it. Stop enabling them. Stop playing the game of identity politics, which is torn straight from the pages of the playbook of the cultural Marxists, and recognize our enemy for who they are. Because they're not hiding the fact that they are our enemy. They are not even attempting to be covert about this in any way, shape, form, or manner. It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible that we see this coming forth and the left still doesn't want to wake up to exactly what it is that they, through their failed public policies, have enabled, emboldened, and empowered. And here's the other thing. This guy was an Uber driver as well. That's amazing to me. So it means that we were even more exposed to risk. That he could have done this sooner or differently. But it comes out of the New York Associated Press, and they say, The man who police say transformed a New York City bike path into a terror scene was an Uzbekistan native who made 1,400 trips as an Uber driver and formed 2 commercial truck businesses. A family friend called Saifulo Saipov, hard-working, and neighbors said he would play with the children in a Florida apartment complex. President Trump derided the suspect as sick and deranged. Details of the life of the suspect, who had no known social media accounts, have just begun to emerge in the hours after Tuesday's attack that killed 8 people and injured at least 11. But here is what we know so far. A quote-unquote young immigrant. Officials who were not authorized to discuss the investigation and spoke on the condition of anonymity identified Saipov as the attacker and said he is 29 and originally from Uzbekistan. He came to the U.S. legally in 2010, the officials said, and it is believed that he lived first in Ohio after his arrival. An acquaintance, Delozona Abdurastova, said Saipov briefly stayed with his family in a Cincinnati suburb upon immigrating. He always used to work, Abdurastova told the Cincinnati Enquirer. He wouldn't go to parties or anything. He only used to come home and rest and leave and go back to work. So there we already see that he wasn't necessarily attempting to assimilate into our lifestyle. He was trying, yes, to make money, but again, it's not very connected with the normal sorts of things. Then it says he was drawn to Florida. Authorities said Saipov had a Florida driver's license, and some public records showed an address for him in Tampa at an apartment complex. Residents at that complex said FBI agents came by Tuesday evening and conducted interviews. Michael Roberts, 30, an overnight shift worker, said he was asleep when the agents showed up at about 5:30 p.m., but they had interviewed his cousin. He said both he and his cousin had moved in only a week ago and had never seen Saipov. A friend who met Saipov in Florida, Kojban Matrikov, told the New York Times and the New York Post that he seemed like a very good guy. My kids like him too. He is always playing with them, Matrikov told the Post. So then we see that he had New Jersey ties. Officials said Saipov was living recently in New Jersey, where he allegedly rented a Home Depot truck an hour before driving it onto the bike path in the Big Apple. On Tuesday night, police investigating the deadly rampage surrounded a white Toyota minivan with Florida plates parked in parking. We have to ask ourselves why it is that this sort of nonsense does occur. We have to be vigilant, particularly in the face of such heinous and horrific attacks as these, because these sorts of people will seemingly strike out of nowhere. In order to keep ourselves safe, what we have to be ready, willing, and able to do is to develop and adhere to a much more stringent situational awareness of our surroundings at any given point in time, thereby alerting ourselves to the sorts of dangers that are clear and present, even though it's not always clear. We have to be able to take our own security in hand. We have to be able to be responsible for our own safety and well-being as well. Here it goes on to talk about him as an Uber driver. The ride-hauling company Uber said Saipov passed its background check and drove for the service for 6 months, making more than 1,400 trips. The company said it banned him from the service after the attack. Great. That's like saying a firefighter that then goes and becomes a firebug is then banned from the firehouse. Thanks. After he's burnt down a house, thanks. That's useful. It said it was in touch with the FBI and offered its assistance, and that it was reviewing Saipov's driving history, but found no related safety reports. So again, these sorts of situations are very similar to the ones of the mass shooter types, in that they have no history or criminal record of this, and so nothing that we could implement that hasn't already been tried, such as the claim that we need to try and do extreme vetting, would prevent this. Again, it's going to fall down to situational awareness and the ability of the popular sovereigns in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave to be able to act for themselves, to be able to defend themselves. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that means taking on responsibility. But remember, as we have always stated here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, the two fundamental pillars that form the American identity and culture are those of self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. We need to become self-determinate about our own security. We need to stop looking to the government as some sort of an end-all, be-all solution to these problems. And we need to address the issue of the common thread and strain and denominator here of Islamo-fascist barbarism. It is a threat. It is something that needs to be viewed much more carefully. We can no longer continue to bow down at the altar of political correctness and moral relativism. We cannot just try and claim that we simply cannot go forth and defend ourselves because that might offend Jihad Johnny. No, all of that nonsense must come to a swift and immediate end sooner rather than later. This is what we have to do in order to secure our health, safety, well-being, but above all, our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights and liberties. We see that these terrorists are out there, and we know that they are out there, and we have to be vigilant, and we have to be ready, willing, and able to proactively safeguard and maintain our health, safety, security, but above all, our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And we must do that by fostering a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of not only our shared United States Constitution, but also our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. That way, we become more situationally aware. We realize what the dangers are, and we call out our enemies for who they are. And then we can make ourselves a safer nation. With that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol. Make that 2, since we know the Islamo-fascists don't like it when we drink. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our state-of-the-art radio program. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions, please feel free to leave them either in the comment section here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page, or even on our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us over on Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationEX. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, as well as the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. You will find a link to the Blogspot account that is just chock full of useful information. And just as you will find in the description section of today's Solo Flight Special Edition of our state-of-the-art radio program, you will find a link to the Cafe Press account. Folks, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of trinkets, goodies, novelty items, such as shot glasses, drinking glasses, hats, shirts, even pet apparel, wool, jewelry, watches, tote bags, laptop sleeves and protectors, smartphone and tablet sleeves and protectors, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer logo, or the First Class Passenger logo, or even the two Uplifting America logos, all at reasonable prices. Therefore, when you go to the Cafe Press account, you can see that you just can't go wrong. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you again the next time that we fly you over the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment. Please do take care.